It's time to be woke. Take off your shades. It helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I am Andy Kennedy. It is Wednesday morning. Thank you very much for tuning in this morning. This is going to be the first show of a series of three that is a deep dive into a project that has been started locally for Carrie in her neck of the woods in New Mexico. And it's a very interesting story. It's about veterans and climate change and sustainability and PTSD and a whole bunch of other things. And how do all those things go together is what we're going to be talking about over the next three shows. So that starts with the introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Andy. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and welcome everybody to the show. So just real quick, a little bit of housekeeping. If you are tuning in for the first time, we are live and interactive. So if you type a comment in the chat, we really want to engage with you. Be polite, be nice, stick to facts. But yeah, definitely join that conversation. And this entire series this week, we've done series before, but we've been working on this since October. This is a really complex situation, but now is the time really to talk about it because Andy's right. It deals with veterans, PTSD, housing crisis, climate change, all of these things. This is the story that is intersectional in this. And the reason why I feel it's so important is because when we're still talking about politics and Congress and what they're doing and not doing, and I was just watching yet another clip where Congressman Clyburn was saying we need to be more polite while we die quietly. So this actually is the story that I feel encompasses all of these things. So we can either continue to wait for Congress to do nothing, or we can maybe turn a little bit of attention to some of the really positive solutions that are coming out of our own communities. When things get tough, this is when we as human beings tend to be at our best working together. So this particular story, even if you're not a veteran, all of these things, you feel like it doesn't apply, I would suggest to you that if you've been alive in the last 2 years going through a global pandemic and everything that's going on here, you might have a little bit of PTSD at this point. So some of the themes and things that we're going to talk about today and things that you will hear, I think they're really going to resonate in an unexpected way with all of our viewers this morning. So again, to me, this is a positive story about what is possible. And, a shout out to Rome Bethia. He is on his tour for the poor, and he's out there in the community, letting marginalized people, disenfranchised people know that somebody's out there who cares. And I love all of that. But in talking to Rome, he and I were looking at vacant lots, abandoned lots in the city of Detroit. And his goal was to raise funds to create a community garden. But based on the work that we were doing on this story, I suggested to Rome, I said, Rome, what if you took one of those vacant lots that already has a connection for city water, already has a connection for electric, and what if you built houses, and not just any house, but a house that could withstand the effects of climate change, the strong storms, wind, we're seeing tornadoes in the city of Chicago, all of these things. What if you had a house that could do that and was so efficient with heating and cooling that it was next to nothing for those types of facilities in a household. And then the person who had that house had no mortgage. Think about it. Most of our income here, as suppressed as it is going towards a mortgage payment or rent. What if we were building houses for a fraction of the price that could meet all of these challenges? And Rome was like, okay, yeah, I can dig it. I can't obviously repeat it in the way that he said it, but but he's on board with it. So so this is kind of I'm going to tease it a little bit, but this is kind of going to lead into one of the projects that I've been working on here. Part of the reason I am here in the desert to do exactly that, kind of a test case. Like, and I am the worst person in the world to be the test case, but if all of this works as planned, then a middle-aged, blind, disabled woman built a house with no mortgage, no payments, and it's efficient, and it can withstand, I think it's an F4 tornado or a Category 4 hurricane. So this is where I really want you to kind of lean in and just pay a little bit of attention. So, Andy, am I missing anything here, or it's still early?
No, there's actually, I was going to weigh in about Rome and his ability to purchase a spot, you know, in the devastated city of Detroit that the oligarchs have forgotten. And you know, what a testament to the technologies out there that can sustain people that are on a daily basis silenced because they don't serve anyone that is a oligarch or a corporation, right? In terms of a proper way to build it, a proper way to power it, sustainability, all of this stuff, right? It would be the epitome of what we can accomplish in a place that has been so devastated by neoliberalism that people won't move there, and the people that are stuck there can't move away. And by the way, Flint still has no drinking water, right? Like, it just the belly of the beast, and this is how we survive it. I just think that's an incredible concept to show locally the neighbors what is capable of what people can accomplish when they put their minds to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the conversations that Rome and I were having, because you know, again, on the worst case scenario here with limited resources, I don't know anybody, I'm putting these things together. So on Wednesday, one of our guests is going to be a new person that has joined the production company that Andy and I have, who is here for this purpose. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the dynamics of what this material is that we're using. And I don't want people to get caught up in the fact that I'm in New Mexico, so it only works in New Mexico. That is not true. So this same building technique that is low cost and efficient, you can do it anywhere, absolutely anywhere. And we're going to show those examples as we get into it on Wednesday. So I don't want to jump too far ahead because I know that this is really complex. But this video that we're going to show today is only about 10 minutes long, but this introduces you to an individual who is exactly one of those stories. He's kind of like the counterpoint to Rome. He looked around, looked at his own life and went, okay, enough is enough. I have to do something, and I have to do something not only to save myself, but to save other people. And this is an Army veteran who was in the deployed to Afghanistan 2 tours. And this is his story about how he pulled himself back from the brink, back from suicidal tendencies, from dark places, found his way forward, and wanted to extend that not just to veterans, but to help veterans take all of this back to their community and help their own neighbors. So this is an amazing story, and I hope that you will appreciate it in the way that I did, because based on what I saw, as an investigative journalist, I'm always very cynical. So when I first talked to this gentleman, Ryan at Veterans Off Grid, I was very cynical, and I went and checked facts and looked at things and did all of this research, and was so convinced by what he was saying and the other people and things that I uncovered, like the Army Corps of Engineers is currently using the same building technique all over the world, but not for US people. So when I took a look at all of this, this is why I was like, okay, let's test it. Let's do a proof of concept. And that is currently the project that I am working on behalf of our production company and hopefully all of you. So without further ado, Andy, let's get to this video, and I hope you will stick with it, pay attention, and join us on the other side to have a really good family conversation about the content in it. And if you're cynical, that's fine. Let's talk about it. But Andy, if you would please go ahead and cue that up.
Taos, New Mexico is best known for its luxury spas, world-class art, stunning architecture, and ski resorts. What isn't advertised is that Taos County has a median income of just $36,000, well below the national average, while median home values soar to over $236,000. Nowhere else is the income gap and the struggle for affordable housing more plainly felt. And just outside the city, perched high atop a mesa in Carson, New Mexico, is an organization doing something extraordinary to address it. Veterans Off Grid is a non-for-profit charity that bridges the gap for those who have been forgotten, marginalized, and cast aside. They help rehabilitate soldiers struggling with PTSD and homelessness, but it is so much more than that. In this ruggedly beautiful and peaceful setting near the Carson National Forest, this organization just may hold the key to our very survival.
We're trying to do something different, but it's so big and so vast that it's hard for organizations to be like, oh, they fit in our box. Because we're trying to help the environment, we're trying to help veterans, but there's 23 different ways we're trying to help veterans. There's about 8 different ways we're trying to help the environment, and all kinds of things. And it's not just one. And so we're trying to hit all of these things at the same time because it's cumulative. They help each other. And that's what we're trying to do, is create a comprehensive plan that isn't just housing a veteran. It's not just feeding a human. It's not just picking up trash. It's all of it at once. And because you're doing that all at once, it's going to work. A lot of times when veterans come back or get out of service, they overhear conversations like maybe people talking about the Kardashians, maybe people complaining about how their coffee was made that morning or how heavy traffic was and it ruined their day. When you juxtapose that from what they've had to go through and their bad days, it's almost disgusting. It's frustrating. The level of superficiality that you come back to, it almost feels like you're an alien in a different country than you left. And so if we can surround them with their peers who have been through those places, been through the dark times, and also get quality people coming that are civilians who want to give back to the veteran community because maybe their dad was a veteran, maybe their uncle was a veteran brother, or they wanted to honor the veterans just because they wanted to say thank you. But saying thank you, most people don't realize that. What does it do to a veteran's psyche when you say thank you to a veteran? In my personal case, the person who should be thanked is the guy who gave his life for me. I was the one who came back. And so it's almost like it puts you back into the place that you're trying to numb your mind from. whether that's through alcohol, drugs, TV, high-risk activities. Like, you're trying to distract yourself from thinking about whatever trauma happened to you. In my personal case, it was the TV. I'd get up in the morning at 7, turn it on, eat a bowl of cereal, and boom, I was there till 11 at night and wondering where the day went. And then I started to sink into depression and spiraled downhill. So this is a way that civilians can be like, hey, this is more than thank you. I'm going to help you build this house that's going to take care of a veteran for the entire lifetime of that house. And in doing so, they then get to know the veteran and they get to know the story. And what does this do for the veteran? It redeems civilians in their mind, because a lot of veterans, they despise them. They don't want to be one. Well, how do you become a civilian again if you never want to be one, or if you never want to associate? So a lot of veterans will go off into the woods 20 miles and live in a tent, because it's more comfortable being alone with their thoughts, being in nature, than being in society and listening to, excuse my language, the bullshit of daily life.
So tell me why this place, Carson, is perfect in conjunction with all of the activities that you're doing here.
Carson is perfect just because it's Carson. When I first moved here, I was looking for cheap land. I looked in Taos. Whew, not cheap. Wow, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, it's $100,000 an acre. How am I going to buy enough acreage for someone with an idea who doesn't have foundation money, who doesn't have rich people around to support? Like, how am I going to make this happen in Taos? Taos was my first choice, but there's no possible way, not with the cost of land. You're close enough to Taos, which is about a 30-minute drive, but yet you're far away from society. And if you look around, we're elevated. So for a veteran, that's good. We're always defense-minded. We want our face to the door. We can't stand when our back is to the door. We want large, open spaces that we can see what's coming. And that is just another aspect of the 23 ways we help veterans, is that we're elevated. That's just one. And so that they can see, they can feel comfortable. They don't even know why they feel comfortable. They just feel comfortable. Plus, look at the views. I mean, you have amazing views here. And so you're in nature. National Forest is right behind us. And so you've got a place where veterans can take off. They can walk, they can bike, they can go off and explore. It feels isolated yet connected. And that was the feeling that I was going for. I didn't want to be in the middle of a city. I didn't want to be 4 hours from a city. That's too isolated.
The day I traveled to Carson, New Mexico to meet with Ryan, his name appeared in the local paper. It wasn't a full-page spread or even an article about his organization. Instead, it was a letter to the editor from a neighbor across the county, thanking Ryan for hauling tons of crushed recycled glass to her remote roadway. His efforts allowed her vehicle access after heavy snow had made the muddy roads impassable. Gravel fill is expensive, but crushed glass is free, and Ryan was happy to oblige.
The glass is a renewable resource. You know why? People won't stop drinking beer. No matter what you do, they're still going to drink. Okay? So if you have a renewable resource that no one's using, what happens to it? You're recycling it, but are you? What happens when you turn in your bottles? No one knows. They just turn them in because they're supposed to. A lot of times it goes right to the dump. People don't realize that. Glass is heavy. So the glass, they had a problem with the county because they were recycling glass, but where do you put it? And so they were getting mountains and mountains and mountains of glass. And so they decided, you know what, we're not going to recycle it anymore. And people in Taos were pissed because they were like, wait a second, this is what we do. This is what makes Taos Taos, is we are environmentally friendly. Let's think of a way to use it. So I did this road as a test. This is before they made it, not possible to recycle glass. And I wanted these mesa roads to be stable for driving. And, for selfish reasons, because I need to be able to get in and out of my property, but also because if you have a product that's not being used, well, why don't we use it? Find something that it can be done in.
In addition to helping veterans with their PTSD symptoms and complications, Ryan and Veterans Off Grid is offering a new mission to veterans, one to help address the growing climate crisis as well as homelessness across the country.
And, on a very, very, very tight budget, we're building houses. Houses are extremely expensive in this day and age to build them. So I've got to try to lower that cost as much as possible to make sure that our donors' money is being used as best as possible and stretches as far as possible. I don't get paid. Nobody here gets paid who's a resident. And we just turn that money basically into building materials to continue building, providing places for people to live. And in about 3 months, we're going to have all of the stimulus completely cut off. People are going to have to pay their mortgages again, but they're going to have to pay it all up front in a lump sum. They're going to have to pay their rent again, and they're going to have to pay it all up front in a lump sum. How many do you think have actually saved that money? They're just trying to make ends meet. So you're going to have 20 million people who are homeless. What are we doing?
Ryan's plan is ambitious, but how does he expect to help veterans go from this to this? For more on that, be sure to tune in to part 2 in this exciting series.
All right, that was that's quite the video. And by the way, I wanted to just say kudos to you and the reporting of this, Carrie. It was really well done video. I was more than happy to do a little editing for you. I think it turned out great. Before we start our conversation though about the video, I just wanted to say good morning to a few people that are in the chat, like Holly and Emily and Eric and Aziz. Thank you for talking it up on in the chats, and that's great to see you as always. So Carrie, what's your overall impression of Ryan and what he's been able to accomplish so far?
Well, so when I was first presented with a story, it was kind of a feel-good story. So I went out and did the interview and did the tour of his facility and was really working on this. But I'm going to call out to the poll results. So thank you for those of you who participated in the poll. We had 75% of you said yes, that you would be willing to learn how to build a house if it meant being rent and mortgage free for life. And then the maybes, 25% of you. I'm going to say that the maybes, you're probably a little more honest. And that's exactly the camp that I fell in, because I'm always, like I said, questioning everything. So at the end of this interview, I'm sitting there going, okay, this is a good feel-good story, and maybe he's being a little ambitious here. So I went to do the research because I am not familiar with this mode at all. I mean, I had heard about cob building, and of course I'm of Irish descent, so I know that they still use a similar technique. And oh, by the way, those houses have been standing for hundreds of years. But I grew up here in this country where we do the stick-built house. A house just went up down the street from me in less than 3 weeks using the stick-built formula. But also coming from Illinois, I know how expensive it was to heat and cool. And you always get those winterizing things. Well, you got to winterize your house, and it never seemed to be enough. So when I started to do the research, was Ryan correct? Was the technology and things, everything that he was saying, was this true? Because it almost sounds too good to be true, and I don't like those. So this kind of gets into part 2 of this story, the research that I did. And it was one of those things when I kind of liken it to growing up in the capitalist society and, you know, the bootstraps and all of these things that we're raised with. And then when you learn MMT and modern monetary theory, I was pissed. I was pissed learning about how money actually works at a federal level, and that all of the things that we're going through, from homelessness to struggling with hunger issues and all, these are choices. These are not necessities. And it was similar to what I found when I started digging into Ryan's story and everything that he was talking about from the humanitarian standpoint and housing. So I'm looking at the chat and people are talking about capitalism requires homelessness. And that's true to a point, but there's more to it than just capitalism, because if you have fewer housing starts and fewer homes available, it drives up the price. It's all an investment thing. So the idea that you as an individual with your family, friends, could raise a house and do it for a fraction of the cost and have this thing stand for generations, it's kind of a threat, isn't it?
Well, absolutely.
So,
Right. And that's a big thing. And I think you're referring to Randy's comment about the requiring homelessness. I would push back on that and say that homelessness is just an offshoot of capitalism, right? It's a slow march to the haves and the have-nots, as the haves get to be smaller and smaller, and the have-nots are the vast majority of the citizens, right? Which is why capitalism will implode onto itself eventually, just because it's completely unsustainable. We've talked about that before. But in terms of Ryan and what he's doing, I was really struck the way that he was explaining the intricacies of how all of these processes and solutions were all interwoven. And I think he said something to the effect of, like, it helps climate change in 8 ways, and it helps veterans in 23 ways. And I found that fascinating, that he was able to not only purge his demons to some extent in an enlightened way of understanding what he was trying to survive when he got home from serving, but not only that, but take that to an entirely different level and turn that into a positive thing to help others. Like, very eloquent speaker and really good at conveying his ideas, right? And so the offshoot of this is looking at the help that he's giving people. And just the little details, like, we chose this place because the land was cheap, but not only that, it's high up on a mountain. So because a veteran feels more comfortable on top of a mountain, because in 360 degrees, he can see what's coming. And even on a subconscious level, they were more comfortable with that, even if they didn't realize it, right? Like that's something, unless you're a veteran and have had to deal with serving and going to war, you would have no idea that was even a thing, right?
True. And just a shout out to Kyle and Wendy. I agree with you guys totally. Wendy says, I like that he was addressing multiple issues simultaneously. We don't have time to do less. And you're absolutely right. Obviously, this wasn't in the segment, but as Ryan was talking about his own experience with PTSD and some of the things in it, I started crying as we were filming it. And I'm, of course, trying to be quiet, because as he was speaking to my own symptoms of PTSD for very similar reasons. Now, I didn't serve in the military, but living overseas, I went through very similar episodes of being shot at and being shelled, all of those things. So that's part of where my PTSD came from. But Ryan so gets it. He so gets it because he went through it. And I think this is the positive aspect of the story. What we go through, we are hardwired, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I've seen this time and time again. We are hardwired to fix ourselves by reaching out to help others. And I think that is the crux of the story. The other piece that I think is really telling is, so we shot this interview in October, and I've been keep in touch with Ryan, and Ryan has become a mentor to me in what we're doing here in the southern portion of the state. But we were talking about Los Angeles. Los Angeles, their plan to address homelessness was they built like, I think it was 20 homeless shelters, like small houses, and they used metal to the tune of $130,000 for these tiny, they look like giant mailboxes, or if you have a big dog,
ice
this would be a
huts.
doghouse. And yeah, kind of ice fishing huts. And they spent $130,000, and Ryan and I were texting back and forth because the price tag on those inadequate shelters was so astronomical compared to what Ryan is building. Ryan is building these for anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 a piece. And these are livable. In the summer, they stay cool. In the winter, they stay warm. And it's just a much better facility than putting somebody in, an ice hut and expecting them to be okay. Not all shelter is equal. And it's just this waste of resources and money that is going into it. So it was just very telling.
And there's the other thing about that is, well, why would they choose that type of solution to a problem? Well, of course, in this capitalist society that we live, right, someone is going to get very rich making these shelters, that make no sense, but are extremely expensive. And so there's a corporation or someone well connected within the government that is now making money hand over fist, with something that is, for the most part, performative, right?
Right. And Eric, you bring up a good point. Eric says, well, as a Black people, we tried this in the various Black Wall Streets, but in the end, they were destroyed by white, sadistic, racist people. And he's addressing Kyle's comments. So I agree with Eric in this, and I would point to the story that we did with the new Black Panthers and the Latin Kings and the White Panthers that are rising up now as a good model, because Eric, you and I both know that if a bunch of Black folks start to succeed, you're right, the racists are going to come right in. So, which is why somebody like me, a good ally who happens to be white, I get to hold the front line in front of you. I put myself between you and them and put my reputation, my physical presence, all of that sort of thing, which is what the White Panthers are doing. So we're starting to see this, and maybe it's because of our proximity to these kind of stories, but I'm seeing this happening everywhere in various forms. So in a project like this that I'm talking to Rome about with Detroit, if the people of Detroit who have lived there and been abandoned, as you said, Andy, marginalized, if they start to do this and you have enough allies, because if I'm in the suburbs and I am being taxed out of my home, I'm very interested in this project and I want to come learn from you. And by learning, I'm actually making these bricks, I'm making these stones, I'm setting these things, I'm learning from you, I support you. And this is how we as individuals, by the white allies, by our Black brothers and sisters, people of color all over the country. This is how we do it. The 98% of us who are all in the same boat. Again, we can wait for Congress to do nothing and we die, or this is a story, and I think Ryan really captures it because it's not just Black, white, whatever. we have all these veterans, and it goes into this a little bit more in part 2, veterans who are also being marginalized. Remember that promise we made them? That we are going to give you help with housing and education and healthcare for life. Oh, by the way, we don't. What we do is we put veterans on a Medicaid program, a voucher program that has been cut every decade. So veterans are also in the same boat. They're just tossing them pills for PTSD and then sending them on their way, right? So I love this story because all of our veterans of whatever ethnic background, we can put them to work for our communities. These are our brothers and sisters, moms and dads. Let's give them a new mission. So this is just like the Army Corps of Engineers, help them back into society by helping us. And so I think this was yet another layer of the story that we need to talk about. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And Holly,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Carrie. You were gonna.
Well, I just saw Holly said Detroit Water Brigades too. Remember them, and yeah, you're absolutely right. When we get together and stop fighting about what the 1% is saying that we're doing, when we get together, oh boy, can we change everything? And that is the core of the story. So.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And the whole concept of what Ryan is talking about, because originally, as he's experimenting with how to create things, and I love the story about the reclaimed glass that nobody wants, that everybody thinks gets recycled, but the majority of it just ends up in landfill. Right? People would lose their shit if they knew that. But the story about building the first home for the first person, but in that process, you're including them in the building process. So they're learning that skill. The next person that is in line that requires a home build, then there's 2 people that know how to do it, right? And so every time a new house is built, the person that is the recipient of that place learns that skill. So what are we doing? We're passing down the skills so that eventually you create an army of people that know how to do that, right? There are things that, and people will take, pot shots at communities like the Amish community or the Mennonite community in Canada that says that, they're just backwards communities and so on and so forth. But, for whatever you feel, they are still communities that are completely closely knit. And when somebody needs a home, they all pitch in and build it, right? What's wrong with that concept? Why can't we think in terms? Because our governments abandon us, right? Until we get enough people woke that will take back government for the people, we basically have to fend for ourselves. There's nothing that, like the way that if you want to fight cancer, right, and fund research, it has to come from the people because the government is abdicating the responsibility for that, right? The same way in terms of healthcare in the United States and proper education, all these things. Well, if the government's not willing to do that or change, and enough people aren't awake to make it change, then you basically have to put things in place that allow people to help themselves, right? Screw the government. We don't need them anymore. We're just going to go about it and figure it out on our own because we're our only friends, right? The same way that the embargo in Cuba basically has made that country so poor. And in the early 2000s, they had nothing. And there were some real problems coming up. The people basically said, we're going to have to figure it out on our own. They banded together and they did it, right? The ability for human beings to survive is very strong. And that's how we do it, right? If our government's going to abandon us, then we got to look out for ourselves.
Exactly. And going back to Ryan's testimony and Sin, I see your comments about the veterans and the PTSD and the high suicide rates, and this is part of it, right? So when you go through that military indoctrination and you're told one story about what your mission is, and you find out later that maybe that wasn't the case, now you're left with all the skills and training and still the echoes of that indoctrination. What do you do with it? And which is why I love what Ryan's doing. He's refocusing these veterans in a positive way. And as Andy says, to help their communities, right? So you become your leader in your community when you get these skills and you go home and you just find a vacant lot and you start doing. So along those lines, just to get into the project that I'm working on, and with, you know, the recycling resources, I am sitting now in the middle of the desert, in high desert, in above Albuquerque. It's a lot. There's no electricity, there's no water, none of the resources. So what we have done here as part of our production company is we are going to take Ryan's model and we're going to test it. And I am so committed to this. Like, I would not bring this story forward if I wasn't certain that it was viable. So what I have personally done is my husband and I sold our house in Illinois. We paid off all our debts with the proceeds of that sale, which left us homeless with nothing. Okay. So what we did here in the desert is, what would it look like if I'm going to try and sell this concept to somebody in Detroit, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, California, Oregon, wherever? I have to go through the motions and actually live it and put myself at risk to do so. So that is exactly where I'm at. This is why I'm in the desert. I have no bandwidth, as you see me struggle with. So what we did was we scraped up, we were fortunate enough to have a tiny 401 retirement account. Most people don't even have that, but we had a tiny one. We cashed it out, which under the capitalist society is unthinkable. So what happens, some of you will know, if you have an IRA, a Roth, 401k, if you cash it out, you have this huge penalty, and it's not. When you really sit down and look at it, you get a 10% penalty, which is substantial for a small account. So we paid the 10% penalty to the federal government for cashing out early. We're obviously not 65. So now we had this even smaller pool of money. So what are we going to do with this money? It was $62,000 left over. This is all I have in the world. We're going to build a house. We're going to build a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house out of this same material, and I'm going to do it for $62,000. If I can do it here, again, being blind and disabled and a middle-aged, no, I've never built a house before in my life, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it using the same techniques that Ryan talked about with his veterans. If I can do this for this amount of money, and this is going to be a big house, and so some of you mentioned Earthship in the chat, and you're right, you're on the right track. So we're going to use the Earthship design, but it's not going to look like an Earthship thing. So this house has to recapture water, rainwater, so that we don't die. It has to withstand, like I said, fire, flood, hurricane, all of that. And again, it's got to be for this insanely low budget, but still look like a nice house, something that you could pick up and put in the Midwest or whatever else. If I can do this on this size house, we had to go for a certain size in order to catch all the rain that we will need for water. But your house in Detroit, Chicago, New Jersey, wherever, does not need to be this big. Doesn't. You can still recapture water and do so for a smaller size. And if I can build this, you can too. And that is the project that I've been working on. And Andy has been so supportive. Everyone's been so supportive, because this is like some Joan of Arc level shit. Nobody does this. It's insane. But if you get it done, oh boy, what we're working with a team of architects, same architects that work with the Earthship people. We are going to put all of this online so that you can take all of our plans and you can go through it and learn it for yourself. You can modify these plans. You can get this done where you live and understand how it goes. So this is part of the reason why we're bringing on a new person for our group. So he's going to help us with social media and all of these things that we need so that we can convey this information to you in a very real and achievable way in your own neighborhood. So yeah, that is the stuff that I've been working on, this crazy, insane idea that I got to tell you, I have so far, we started building an outdoor shower and other things. And I'm like, holy shit, this is easy. Do you remember when you were a kid, when you were playing in the mud puddle, right? It's the same concept, except so the building code here, and I know I'm rambling now, but the building code requires that your bricks have a PSI, a strength of 300 parts per whatever it is. The stones that we're making, and like the outdoor shower using the cob, we're at 4,500. So I was joking because the wall that makes this outdoor shower, you could put 4 donkeys on this wall and it will stand. And I guarantee you that the wall that I am building with mud is stronger than any house that any of our viewers live in. I guarantee it. So it's been amazing.
It brings up
for
an
me
interesting visual as to how you would get 4 donkeys on a wall. But I get your point, Carrie. And I just wanted to share with our viewers that during this process, Carrie has been sharing parts along her journey with me. And she would attempt to build something and try something, and then it would fall over. And then she would try something a little bit different, put it up, and then it would fall over, right? So the obvious parallel that I use to this, of course, is, Swamp Castle in the Monty Python's The Holy Grail, where we built a castle and it sank into the swamp. So we have christened her garage Swamp Castle.
Yes, absolutely. And this was one of these things where I had never, it's a 20 by 8 foot shed. It's big because I need to put equipment in there. I've never built anything like that in my life. And I'm doing it out with 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts and, holding up panels, and they take off like a sail. This thing fell 12 times. Because I had no idea what I was doing. But the saying out here is you figure it the fuck out. So that's what happened. Every time I fell, I was like, okay, why did this fall? So now you have to go back to geometry and physics. Now I can tell you this shed is standing. It's standing and it's weatherproof and it looks great and it will stand. And this was part of my learning process because I didn't really have anybody to show me how to do it. So this is why, like, I'm nobody special. In fact, I'm like the worst person to be doing any of this. But if I can do it, so can you. So Kyle, I appreciate all of this. And one final note about my situation that I want to convey to all of you. So technically, I'm homeless in the middle of the desert. We were able to scrape enough funds together. I now have an RV, like a lot of people do, apparently, called boondocking. So with this, I pay no rent. I no longer have a mortgage. All of my debts are paid off. And I've never been in this situation before, ever. And I got to tell you, what I focus on now, what I care about now is vastly different than maybe 6-8 months ago. I don't have those same focuses. And it's been a very weird transition for me because now I have that freedom, right? So all I need is to cover a little bit of expense for food and gas and things like that. So the budget has been completely flipped because we stopped doing what we were taught we stopped, buying the biggest house you could afford and keeping up with the Joneses, and oh, you got to have this retirement account and you can't dip into. We stopped all of that, flipped it upside down, and now we're in a very different situation. And to me, this was again like an epiphany of, Andy introducing me to MMT. I'm like, nothing works like we were taught it was supposed to work. And what if we do something different? And that's the situation I'm in now. Now, obviously, there are some struggles, like in the chat was talking about good luck with electricity. I had to learn how to do solar. I had to learn how it works, and I had to find it in a budget conscious way. Now I got it. I went from 0 to 100. We're still, I can go overnight now with solar, add another battery, but we're still learning these things. And this is why I want to say to everybody's watching, you can do this. You just got to dip your toe in the water, or find somebody in your local area who's doing this. Or, by the way, I've posted the link to Ryan's Veterans Off Grid. Go read about what they're doing. Ryan talks about all of these programs on his website, on his Facebook page. That is a wonderful way to start. And like I said, he has been a fantastic mentor to me. And I am excited that we are actually going to have Ryan on to talk about all of this when we get to Fridays. So this has been my transformative adventure, and I'm so thrilled that you are coming along. And Andy, thank you for your video editing prowess. I appreciate it.
Oh, certainly not a problem. I love stories like this, right? That this is someone who's taken a negative and turned it into an absolute positive, right? That has the potential for helping so many people just on its face. It's amazing. Now, Carrie, I will say you've had a little bit of pushback in the chat that technically, because you're in a trailer, you're not homeless, right? Like it is, you could consider that your home, right? You might be trailer trash, but you're not homeless.
Okay, so let me say this. In my lifetime, I've been homeless 3 times. No roof. So yeah, I guess technically you're right. But let me tell you, this particular trailer is older than my kid. And it shows. We've lost the refrigerator 3 times.
But it does behave better. It does behave better.
Slightly. Every day is a new challenge. So yeah, obviously I have a roof over my head. It's aluminum, and there's no insulation in it, whatever. So it's the equivalent of living in the shed that I just built. Yeah. So so this trailer is not the trailer that you would like. It's not a double wide. This is an RV. This was an RV that was pulled out of a derelict lot and refurbished slightly. So okay, all right, maybe I'm not technically homeless. You do with it what you will. If you want to see it and you want to have this experience, we are actually working on something called a woofer. Are anybody in the chat familiar with this? Woofers? I think it's WWOOFER, but I'll look it up. But do they own the land that it's on? Kat, yeah, actually, we're actually making payments on the land. So that's part of where my budget went. So in New Mexico, land is pretty cheap, which is why I'm here and why Ryan was here. So we're making payments on that, but not on a mortgage. And when we're done in 3 years, instead of 30 years, we own 15 acres.
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's amazing that you're trying this, that you're doing this, right? And you're bringing no experience into it. So every time you do something, you're successful at something, you've learned that skill. You'll keep that skill because you had to figure it out. You had to use your brain to actually figure out how to do it. And those are the skills that stay with you, right? That you can share. Because that's the coolest part of all of this, right? You're completely removing yourself from one system and entering into a completely different one with
Yeah.
without having any idea of what to expect. That
Right.
is so unlike human beings, because they're comfortable in
Mhm.
the way where they are, right? So for you
Yeah.
to do this is an unbelievable task. And the fact that you're still alive is amazing. Sorry, I don't mean
Live and flourishing, Andy.
yes,
But yeah,
yes.
so this is part of our story, right? We didn't have all of this money to put down and buy the land outright. So what we did is we found property for the purpose that we needed, and we're paying the owner monthly. And again, it's 3 years instead of 30 years. And so the secondary phase, once we actually build this house, I personally don't need 15 acres, but what can I do with 15 acres? Oh, yeah, there are 700,000 people around me. Maybe they need some food. So that is the next process of this. So we're almost talking about a community garden. We're going to do a really big one. And there are 3 food pantries in Albuquerque and 1 here in where I live in Tierras. I'm pretty sure they need the help. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do it with the sustainable, organic, all that good touchy-feely stuff. And that is the next phase. Can we do it? I don't know jack shit about any of that, but I'm going to figure it the fuck out.
You know what?
And I'm going
That's
to pull in
amazing,
help
right?
from, yeah.
And what you're doing is you're telling communities around you, or communities anywhere, that we can move away from these large industrial farming sites or these huge corporations that, that make billions of dollars every year, putting the small farmers and the small vegetable growers out of business. We're saying, screw you. We don't care about that anymore. We can sustain our community on its own, through farmers markets, through personal gardens, through small farming, and we can survive. We don't need that anymore, because if we're the ones that are going to have to come up with solutions to climate change, that's how we got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's exactly what we're trying to address, because I don't know that this is 100% the answer, but I do know that this is a better solution than what we had been doing. So if it works, why would we not? Right. So one of the things I'm looking at is, and you'll see this in episode 2 if you tune in on Wednesday, the press that we purchased. I couldn't get this made in the United States. I had to get it from India, from a very nice group who's doing this and educating, and then had to pay extra to have it imported and shipped here by boat and go through customs. So my first question was, why is this not being made in the United States? And can it be? And the answer is yes. And so that we can take this kind of technology, improve upon it. And what if we had one of these presses in Detroit, and we had one in Chicago, and we could lend it out anywhere? Like you said, the Amish model, raise a house, right? So according to this, there's a manual press and an automatic press. So I have the manual. 10 people over 8 hours can make 1,000 bricks. I need 1,500 for this big house that we're building. So if you have a smaller footprint and you have a couple of friends who are willing to work part-time after work for a few beers and pizza, you can have a house in 3 months.
And
3 months,
on top of that,
mortgage-free.
learn a valuable skill that could go to benefit yourself and the people you know, right? And pass that information from person to person in a way that shows people that we can do this, right?
Yeah.
If we get enough people in our society to understand that I don't need to spend $500,000 on a housing contractor and all of the groups and corporations that have to come in and dig a foundation and pour the cement and lay the floor and put up the walls and the exterior and the roof and the shingles and everything else, then there starts to be less demand for that, right? There starts to be more demand for sustainability, because in a capitalist society, when you make a product irrelevant, it goes away because it can't, people don't make profit on it. They want nothing to do with it. Right.
That's exactly right. And I'm going to toss this one out to Eric. Eric, generational wealth. We know that in the United States, in particular, in our particular brand of capitalism, Black communities, Black families have missed out or had generational wealth taken from them, stripped away from them. And they are feeling it far more than even marginalized white families in this situation. So let me ask you a question, Eric, because this is one of the things I'm looking at. If I build this house and this house can stand for hundreds of years, what does that do to generational wealth, right? I have a kid, and he's already been out here, and he sees it. Now that he got the visual, he sees it. That's my only heir. If I give him, the 5 acres and part of this plus a house, and he's not paying a mortgage, and he's got all of this, all he needs to do is pay, I think it's $23 in property taxes a year. What does that do for the generational wealth for my progeny, who happens to be a Black man? So Eric, I would put this out to you. Just sit with it a little bit. If in Detroit, one family builds a house and then they help their neighbor build a house, have we not just toppled the entire mortgage debt system? That's
Well,
what we're
absolutely.
talking about.
That's the key, right? Like, I mean, people, we find more and more that especially from my generation, when houses were more reasonably priced, and we didn't see this inequality in terms of wealth in the country, right? It was much easier to get a home. That was your investment in your future, right? That at some point you could sell that home, and that would be your retirement or your nest egg, right? On top of whatever pension you were able to glean while you were working, right? But what if you turn the tables? What if you're able to build a house that doesn't require a mortgage, right? Then you can save that money. You're not putting away thousands and thousands of dollars per year trying to pay money to a bank, which for the first 10, 15 years is primarily interest payments. You're not even paying off your, if we can turn the tables and people can actually save, right? And they can enjoy their lives instead of having to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to survive. How does that change our society, right? In a completely different way.
From my own ego and necessity, they have this concept here, you call it something else outside of New Mexico and whatever, called a casita. So when I'm older, and my son takes over the big house, I can build this little casita right in the backyard, and I'm not in a nursing home, and I'm still taken care of, and he gets all the benefit, and I get this cute little house that I get to take care of. So it's just a completely different way of looking at retirement and wealth and things like this. So I'm so excited to bring the second part of this series on Wednesday. And again, Andy, thank you for all of your help in getting this out there. But thank you, everybody, for your comments and kind critiques in the chat. Really appreciate that. And I hope that you will join us again for part 2. And then on Friday, we will have Ryan himself to talk about what's going on and how he's evolved with his program, what they're working on, and how you can take all of this experience and information and translate it to your own community. So please stay tuned for that. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if you're not liked and subscribed to the Fred Hampton Leftist channel, please do so. We have an amazing team that put out some incredible content. Young upcoming people that are willing to put it on the line to try to change the world for the better. And it's amazing to be part of that. That's on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all over the place. And we certainly appreciate the support. So anyways, looking forward to part 2, Carrie, on Wednesday. And thank you for watching, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see you here bright and early on Wednesday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog.